Bangladesh. Agency B Bangladesh will reach out to agency C, D, E, F, G, H until the village, right? So why they pay so much of money? Because every layer of these agents, they need to earn. No lunch. There's no free lunch, right? Nobody do work for free. So when we have more than, when there's a long list of agents, every layer has got to be paid. That's why the workers end up paying so much of money. So ethical recruitment framework suggests companies to go directly to the root, to the source. That means you may have an agent in Malaysia. In fact, you may also not need an agent in Malaysia, because Malaysian law do not say that you must have an agent. You can also do direct recruitment. There are many companies, the big boys, some of them, they are doing direct recruitment. They may have an agency in Malaysia to assist them, or some of them are doing direct recruitment. So what they do is they reduce the layers. So the lesser the layers, or the thinner the layers are, the lesser fee is incurred. So today, for example, if we hire a Nepal agent through the normal channel, the worker end up paying 6,000 ringgit, 5 to 6,000 ringgit plus minus. But there is a company, electronics firm, who does their own recruitment with one agent, and this agent has an agency in Malaysia and also the same company. That means they are both in Malaysia and Nepal. They do direct recruitment using this one agency, and the cost of recruitment is 2,500, and the company pays for it. So why companies don't pay for recruitment fee? Because it's expensive. Why is it expensive? Because we just tell the company, you do what you care. I don't care. I just want the workers in my doorstep tomorrow, right? So the agency will start, going through sub-agents and so on and so forth, and the workers pay for it. So ethical recruitment framework will actually reduce your recruitment costs and reduce all these uncertainties. And so have a look at it. In fact, in the National Action Plan on Forced Labour produced by the Government of Malaysia, it talks about raising awareness on ethical recruitment practices. It talks about transparency in the recruitment processes, right? So now that's the government agenda, and I believe it sets the tone for companies to follow. So these are some of the lapses in current recruitment process. No due diligence done before we appoint recruitment agents. So what we do, or that agent is my friend, my cousin, my brother, my sister. We have been using them for the last 20 years. Now, yes, you can still use them, but put them through a due diligence process. So if they become a winner end of the day, so be it. But they need to understand, the agents need to understand what is forced labor. How many agents of, where company engages them, how many of them are aware what exactly is forced labor? What is recruitment fees? What is ILO's guideline? What is, how do we prevent forced labor? What is ethical recruitment? What about employment contracts? How the workers are being interviewed? Are workers, subject to, certain threats? If you don't pay me, I don't, etc. We need to ask our agents, how about your sub-agents, are they collecting money, right? So sometimes if employees just close their eyes, don't care, I just want the workers, now that's where issues happen. But if companies really focus, open their eyes, follow through the process, I can tell you the agents will behave. So there are 7 elements that companies should consider. Tender process, and this is an example of Sime Darby, where they do a tender process for the agents. So they don't just use any other agents. Even the agents that we using in the past, everybody goes through a tender process. So when you run through a tender process, it gives you a very clear, certainty that they know what is good, what is right, what is wrong. So, sometimes I'm puzzled with some organizations. They want to buy A4 paper, they'll do a tender process. They want to, get cleaning services, they do tender process. But foreign worker agent, no tender, right? So any services that company, engages should go through a tender process. Another element to consider is appointment agents. Do we want to have sub-agents, or can we avoid sub-agents? In some countries, sub-agents are not legal. So we need to ask ourselves, do our vendor engage a sub-agent in countries where sub-agents are not legal? Should we have a third-party monitoring? Performing risk assessment, ensuring that there's a grievance reporting mechanism, educate, counsel, and engage internal stakeholders, right? So these are the 7 elements that companies should consider, and also external stakeholders. So these are all the elements that companies should consider, taking on. So yeah, I'll skip some of these slides. When I share it later, you can read it by yourself. And also some FAQs, frequently questions that people do ask: how, what, why, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, So that is very much on ILO's indicators. So let me just do a bit of recap. So ILO's indicators, there are 11 of them, which indicates situations where workers are in a forced labor situation. So ILO is, they form the foundation of any ethical standards, whether it's RBA, whether it's Apple, etc. ILO has been there for ages, right? Forced labor, the 11 indicators, forced labor prevention has been there since 1930, right? We are now almost 100 years away from 1930. And of course, subsequently, RBA came about, it was called EICC, RBA came about, based on this foundation, they start building all this upwards, right? So now, compliance to RBA is optional because not all companies, adopts RBA standards, but compliance to Malaysian employment regulations, compliance to ILO indicators, I would say becomes a very basic necessity for companies to operate, especially companies who are, selling their products to Europe, to US, to Canada. Now, buyers in those countries are very particular. If they were to buy a product that is produced by forced labor, they will not. Down the road, if there's any issue, you lose customers, right? So if if a company wants to be known as an ethical producer, ethical player, ethical partner, companies should pay attention to all those things that I've shared, for the last, 40 minutes or so. Okay, so let me move on, giving you a little bit of idea what is a Responsible Business Alliance. So RBA formerly was called EICC. It was founded in 2004. Initially started as a non-profit coalition of the world's leading electronics companies. So these companies got together and worked on this EICC, right? The purpose is to improve social, economic, and environmental conditions in the global electronic supply chain. But today, is it only electronics? Now the scope has been really extended. They also do have programs for non-electronics players. And of course, in 2017, EICC was rebranded to RBA, right? So we've got EICC, RBA standards. Apple, those supplies to Apple. Apple has got their own standards, which is also equally stringent. In fact, Apple standards, in my personal view, I had a chance to work with Apple Code of Conduct, many, many years ago. Apple's Code of Conduct is super, super, super stringent. So those of you who are in semiconductor, I think you know what I'm trying to say. So now, RBA's Code of Conduct talks on many areas which I'll run through, but the compliance framework looks into legal standards and best practices and other standards. So any organization that adopts RBA compliance, I would say that there are a lot of benefits to it. Now, again, you may tell me, if I were to do all this, my operating cost will increase. Now, remember, cost of compliance, it is still cheaper than cost of non-compliance. So to comply with all this, it may sound expensive, but personally speaking, I've been working on this. I consult companies, I study their issues, advise them what to do, how to do, and so on and so forth. I can tell you the cost that company incur versus the money that they make or the money that they lose is nothing much. I can tell you it's less than 5-10%. Seriously, it's nothing much. So now, benefits of RBA compliance, your company stands out, right? You know that you're RBA compliant, your clients is assured that your practices in managing labor is in line with international labor standards, right? That becomes a tool to brand your company as well. So you get positive impact of brand name. It also improves working conditions and workers' satisfaction, increase morale, decrease absenteeism, reduce turnover of employees. Why do you think foreign workers run away? Sometimes we hear foreign workers run away. Foreign workers run away for many reasons. There could be some personal reasons, no doubt. But they also run away because they're not being treated well by the company. They are not being paid. Salaries are not paid on time. There's deduction. They are harassed. They are threatened. In some cases, beaten up. They can't go out, right? Now, all of us, we Malaysians, now, we don't like to be in a confined situation, right? We want to go to kopitiam, we want to go to, shopping, we want to watch movie, weekends, we want to see our family. These workers are away from their family for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. Company would love if workers don't go back at all. But these are human beings. I wouldn't want to stay in one area and not able to go and have teh tarik in mama, talk to my friends at 12 midnight under the, bright moonlight. We all want to enjoy life. We all want to have balance. So why can't these workers have something, similar along those lines, right? So They cannot, we can. I see. I think workers are machines. They are robots. Don't care about them. Don't worry about them. We are human beings. No, that's not the case. They are also equally human beings. They have got a heart. They got family. They got feelings, right? So what ILO, RBA, indirectly is trying to tell us, treat them as a human being. So we need to ask ourselves, why workers run away? Workers don't run away for no reasons. Workers run away because there's some reasons, right? Even local employees. Why do local employees abscond, or they resign, or they leave your employment? There are some reasons to it. So always examine what are the push factors that is making these workers leave your employment. Okay, so let me go briefly through the RBA standards. So RBA standards says what? It covers on 5 aspects: labor, health and safety, environment, ethics, management system, right? So anybody participating in RBA code, RBA audits, they must regard this code as a total supply chain initiative, right? Because when RBA audit happens, they will not just audit you, they also audit your, the first hit is always your on-site suppliers. For example, your security guards, your canteen workers, your cleaners, and so on and so forth. And of course, at a minimum, participants, that means anyone who participates in RBA audits, should also require its next tier of suppliers to acknowledge and implement the code, right? And for RBA, it's very clear, if RBA code is more stringent than your local code, then RBA code will be required. So whichever is more stringent, if local laws are more stringent, then local law takes precedence. So, that's how things are defined. Now, when we look at RBA, the 5 areas I've mentioned just now: labor, health and safety, management system, ethics, environment. So I will not go through all this. This is all taken from, RBA's Code of Conduct version 7. So you can see that when we talk about labor, it talks about freely chosen employment, young workers, working hours, wages and benefits, human treatment, non-discrimination, freedom of association. Now, all these are also mentioned in ILO, right? Just that ILO's, description may not be very explicit. RBA has done has gone through. RBA has defined in very clear manner what is this, what is that, etc. So, but I can tell you all these are quite in line with what RBA is saying, right? And we talk about higher standards of ethics. So labor, I would say, safely, I would say, quite in line with ILO's indicators. When we talk about higher standards of business ethics, we talk about business integrity, and companies should not take improper advantage, disclosure information, intellectual property, fair business advertising and competition, protection of identity, responsible sourcing of minerals. So minerals should not be sourced from countries where they either on forced labor and so on and so forth. For example, one of the commonly heard countries is always Congo, right? Privacy. And then we talk about employees' safety and well-being, occupational safety, emergency preparedness. So there are cases where RBA auditor, audits your place, the safety exit is not, is blocked, right? That is also against our BOMBA regulation. So I would say that, many of these standards defined by RBA or even ILO, our DOSH standards, I would say, I mean, those of you who had a chance to go through DOSH regulations, or if you are a safety officer, DOSH regulations are quite stringent already, but sometimes we don't want to follow. We cherry pick what we want to follow. Because why this is going to be tough? I got to, ensure the fire extinguisher, firefighting system is costly for us. Okay, we don't do it. We cut corners, right? And one day when we're audited, we run into trouble. When there's a fire, who's going to be responsible, right? So now, under the health and safety, it requires company to eliminate, minimize incidences of work-related injury and illnesses. So industrial hygiene, physical demanding work, machine safeguarding, sanitation, food, housing, right? Health and safety, communication. Then when we look at environment, we look into safeguarding the health and safety of the public. So you can see RBA covers your own workers, environment, and public. Because why? If the company is producing emissions, if the country is producing emissions, switch it on. So if the country is producing emissions, what will happen is we discharge water into the drain. Now that affects public, right? So water affects the drain. So these are all areas that we need to take note of, right? Okay, so when we look into individual components of the five elements, so labor, health and safety, ethics, environment, and management system. So this is on management system. So I will not go through all the details, etc., because it'll take some time. But you'll get the slides, you can read it for yourself, right? So some of the zero tolerance that is not acceptable, it's a big no-no. Child labor, forced labor, bonded labor, inhumane treatment. That is on labor. On health and safety would be anything that is imminent. That means any imminent health and safety issues that is dangerous, immediate, that is definitely another zero tolerance. Now, when audit is happening, company falsify records or bribery happens, somebody bribe the auditors. This is again another zero tolerance, which is not allowed in any audit, right? So I can tell you, those of you who have gone through either Apple audit, RBA audit, you will know what I'm trying to say. It's super, super tough, challenging. But I can tell you also, it is not difficult. Why is it difficult? Because we don't get our fundamentals right. We don't work on those foundational issues. Now, if companies are able to work on foundational issues, I can tell you, life is easy. Now, some of you all here, if you have been going through RBA audits, and typically what happened, let me describe this. Normally, let's assume you're going through an RBA audit, or even Apple audit, or SMETA audit, or maybe you're going through forced labor indicator gap analysis. So what normally companies will do, I'm not saying all, but some, assuming the audit is going to happen on 15th of November, 2-3 weeks prior to 15, there will be Pesta Jom Hebo in the company. Everybody running around here, checking this, checking that, policy clear, check the hostel, check the canteen, check the drains, check this, that, etc. Now, and it's a very tiring process, right? And next year when the audit happens again, another round of Jom Hebo, running here, running there, etc. Now, I have worked in a company where audit happens, let it come. We are ready. So companies must be ready 24/7, 365 for any audit. To do so, companies would need to work on fundamental issues, get the basics resolved, ensure that your processes are consistent. You must have high discipline in ensuring that work permits are renewed on time. Employment contracts are renewed on time. There are some shortcuts, yes. For example, employment contract, instead of renewing on a yearly basis, you keep it open-ended, right? Or you put an auto-renewal contract. With that, you do not need to. So there are also some ways you can work smart. Not necessarily work hard, you can also work smart. So there are some, tips how to simplify a process, right? So to me, the first 1-2 years could be challenging, but subsequently, if the fundamental issues are addressed and you have built what I call as a pokayoki, that means you build to last. You do not need to dance around in the next upcoming audits, right? Okay, so when we talk about labor, labor is another indicator. So labor talks about, freely chosen employment as what we've gone through. So you can see what RBA says here, there must be freedom of movement, right? They must be given employment contracts in a native language. They must be told, you must explain to them what are the terms and conditions of employment prior to the worker departing from their original country or country of origin. So you got to tell them what are the terms and conditions before they depart. So, but ethical recruitment framework requires you to tell them during interview. Similarly, when you are being interviewed, let's say there's a job in Singapore, you apply for the job. I'm sure during interview you want to know, or maybe not during interview, once the offer is being made, the HR calls you, dear Sam, we'd like to offer you a job in Singapore, this job. I'm sure you're going to ask, what is the benefits? What is the work hours? What is this? What is that? Before you sign the contract. But foreign workers, tak apalah. Itu orang foreign, tak apalah, never mind, let them come here, I tell them. Now that is a wrong attitude, right? So what RBA says, workers must be briefed on the terms and conditions prior to departing from country of origin. And all work must be voluntary, and workers shall be free to leave. No recruitment fees, no holding of passports, right? So that is on freely chosen employment. Young workers, now no child labor is allowed. Workers under 18, as per Malaysian law as well, they cannot perform in any work that could jeopardize their health or safety. including night shift overtime. Our law also says it. Young adults or young workers are below the age of 18. And if you hire student workers, which I think it may not happen in many cases, now then of course they must be earning the same wage rate as entry-level workers. Working hours, 60 hours. 61 can, tak boleh. 62, tak boleh. 60.5, tak boleh, unless we can prove that it happened during emergency or unusual situation. Now, emergency and unusual situation cannot be planned. You cannot say, oh, now we got our production planning up is emergency. Now, that's not emergency. Emergency situations are like what? There's a fire, there's a machine breakdown. But if machine breakdown every other day and you call emergency, to me, emergency cannot be a routine, right? And workers shall be allowed to leave, allowed at least 1 day off every 7 days. Wages and benefits, we have already said it. Now, all these are quite in line with what ILO is trying to say. Workers must be, treated in a very humane manner, right? It cannot be inhumane. And disciplinary process, must be clearly defined and communicated. There must be also an appeal process. So there are more specifics to this. So when there's a disciplinary process, okay, this is what happens if we do something wrong. Now, under ILO standards, RBA, etc., you need to also have, how can I appeal? If I'm given a warning letter, I must be able to appeal against the warning letter. So there must be an appeal process, right? So for those of you all who want to know how to draft all these policies and guidelines, go to our HR forum, file section. You will find policies on foreign workers management, grievance management, whistleblowing, prevention of forced labor. All these policies samples are in the Malaysia HR forum. As what I said just now, join the forum. You can download these documents for FOC, free of charge. You can buy a cup of coffee, all the hard work done, but it's free for you. Non-discrimination. So what it says here, workers free of non-discrimination, discrimination on race, color, gender, union membership, etc. is not allowed. And workers must be provided with reasonable accommodation for religious practices. So I give you an example just now of prayers. So let's say if he's a Bangladesh Muslim, if he wants to go for Friday prayers to the mosque, he must be allowed to do so, right? Because locals are going for it. And workers should not be subject to any medical tests. So medical tests, unless it is required by law, it cannot be done in a very discriminatory way. Freedom of association, workers should be free to join any unions if it's available for them. They must also be able to openly communicate, share their ideas and concerns with management, right? So this is very much on labor. Then of course, ethics is, right? Ethics, what are those? Business integrity, no improper advantage, disclosure of information, and so on and so forth, right? So I will not go through all this because it's really a long process, but trust me, don't worry about it. We're going to share these slides with you. So you can download the slides, read it, and you'll have a better understanding what exactly are all this, okay? So, and now we talk about management systems. What is management system? And this is really a tough one. Based on my experience, setting up a management system is basically setting up prevention systems, how to avoid future issues from happening, grievance management, and so on and so forth. Okay, how do we set up corrective action process? A process for timely correction of any deficiencies identified, either by your internal auditor or during your internal assessment, or during external assessment, or during external auditors. So all these will be examined. Documentation records also will be examined during your during the audits, right? Supplier, your supplier, have you communicated the code, RBA's code, to your suppliers? And then of course, RBA also have this, which is called validated audit program. Now the purpose is very simple. You do not audit. What happens in companies who's exporting into US, Europe, those electronic suppliers, etc. Different customers will request for audit, right? Customer will say, okay, I want to audit you. I'm going to send in this auditor. Customer B will say, I want to audit you. So end up some companies, some of you may be in this situation where you have got in a year, you've got 5, 6, 7 audits, right? And you'll be busy throughout the year managing audits, dancing around, getting this thing done, that thing done, etc. So the validated audit program, it's a collaborative approach to auditing to reduce your burden, where you have multiple requests for social audits. So here, when you do a validated audit program, that audit program is valid for 2 years. So your customer can rely on this audit report and they know, okay, you have been audited by RBA, so I don't need to audit you. So that's the beauty of RBA's VAP, Validated Audit Program. I think some of the companies in Malaysia are already, achieved this. Now, again, it's a very stringent process. It is not something easy, we can just achieve it overnight. There's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of cleanup, there's a lot of reorganizing, a lot of tidying up to do before a company could go for, a validated audit program. So a lot of basic work need to be done, from the offer letters to getting the hostels up and, to a proper standards, your canteen, your suppliers workers, part of the audit also will look into salaries that your supplier pay to workers. Now, I think some of you all may agree, if you have gone through this audit, easily 40 to 50% of the findings would be on your supplier. This is the experience I've seen. Easily a big chunk of your audit findings, if let's say there's 100 findings or 50 findings, easily half of it or almost half of it will be on a supplier, right? And it's always headache because you've got to keep auditing them, you've got to check the pay slips and all that. But let me tell you this, the good news is there is a methodology to prevent that once and for all, right? Which is called the hybrid approach to managing vendors, where you insource the services. That means you don't allow them to do it, you do it internally. And I can tell you, it is much more easier convinced. So I remember in one audit that I participated, together with my client, the auditor says, if the company is calculating the pay for the suppliers, workers, I think we can believe in what you do. Life became so easy, right? So sometimes there are always shortcuts, there are more smarter way to do things, which we never thought of, right? Okay, and so RBA also requires the next tier of supplier to know and to accept these standards. So you also may need to audit your suppliers. The main supplier, the immediate hit is on-site suppliers who are on site at your place. The canteen workers, the cleaners, if it's in a factory environment, canteen workers, the cleaners, the guards, right? These are, scope. These are group that in most cases will fall into the scope, right? So you also need to audit your suppliers and also guide them. It's not about just auditing. Auditing is a very tiring process. If you can guide them towards compliance, and then you do your, on usual assessment, etc., you find that life becomes easy. So it is. I know it is tough at the onset, but as you start doing it, you find that life becomes easy. Okay, I'm going to take on, questions from anyone that you may, if you have questions. But let me also share with you, we are having a prevention and elimination of forced labor and introduction to RBA version 7. We will be having this, training on 1st and 2nd December. That'll happen in KL and JB. KL or PJ. Usually we do it in PJ Hilton or Sheraton. It is HRD Corp claimable. Only 25 participants per class, so we do have some seats left. So those of you all who want to join to learn more, to learn all the shortcuts, right? Not just learn more. So in this workshop, you will learn the shortcuts. As I said just now, how do you prevent the 50%? You will learn this in the workshop. How do we, reduce the liability? How do we eliminate this? How do you calculate recruitment fees? And so on and so forth. We will go through during this workshop, right? So for those of you all keen, sign up today. SST will be borne by us, right? That is if you sign up today. Okay, so let me take on some questions. Please join our HR forum. Please also join our social compliance chapter. Later, when you get these slides, you can click on the link, right? So let me go back. It's 100 pages, so I had to rush it so that we can cover as much as possible. So let me take on some questions that you may have, and I'll try my level best to answer this. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, so there was a question asked, Nepali workers are done biometric medical Nepal, but when they will do Malaysia, biometrics unfit. But Nepal and Malaysia biometrics are not the same. Are they the same or not the same? So, there were cases, not just biometric, there were also cases where the workers in Nepal or even other country, they pass the test there, they pass the medical test there, right? But when they come to Malaysia, they fail, right? Now, this is something I don't know, because I know some of the systems, the players appointed by our government here. So this is something I'm not able to comment. Whether the test there was done stringently, sometimes this do happen. They may have not done it correctly there, right? They may not have done it correctly. You never know, all kinds of things can happen. And then when here they can't, here they can't, they have to go themselves. They go bring the passport, the clinic will ensure, if it's Raza, it is Raza, or if it's Kumar, it's Kumar. They will want to ensure that this is a worker. You cannot manipulate it, right? So we do not know why there they can pass and here they fail. Okay, Zam asked this question: since election of Malaysia is coming soon, can we give annual leave to those traveling back to hometown? Okay, so Zam, well, I think you are asking a question slightly out of topic, but I don't mind answering this. By the way, we have shared, for those of you who are members of the forum, yesterday we published the sample memo that you could use, for you to produce your own memo, and we have given 4 options there. We've given 4 options for companies, to manage this voting. Now we know under the Election Offences Act, it says that employers cannot stop a worker from going to vote. Employees are expected to give reasonable time, paid time. You cannot deduct for them to go. So now, if you're giving annual leave, workers are going to pay for it, not you are paying for it. Annual leave are workers. So we would encourage you to either give them paid time off, right? So I suggest, Zam, download the memo. We're given 4 options. You see which option suits your situation, where your company is, where your workers are coming from. Okay, Betty Sue asked this: what if workers ask us to keep the passport? Can we keep the passport for them? Betty, this is a very typical question. Now, first question, Betty, why do workers ask you to keep the passport? I can tell you why workers ask you to keep passport. Based on my experience, number 1, you have not given them a safe locker, a safe steel locker, where they can keep the passport locked. Number 2, you have not given them a safe place to keep their passport. So there may be a safe locker, but the house is not safe, right? So that's why workers indirectly require you to keep for them, indirectly ask you. So do you think workers genuinely ask you? I don't think so. In most cases I've encountered, company do not provide proper locker. The place to keep the passport is not safe. That is why workers ask you to keep, right? So we may say that, what if workers give consent? Now, I skipped this point earlier on, but when you get these slides, now in the document prepared by MEF and ILO, it says that even if workers have given the consent, that consent may not necessarily be a genuine consent. So regarding uniform, we give them 5 pairs of uniform per year, 2 pairs of shoes. We are giving them very uniform Monday to Friday. Saturday is freestyle. So if they request again few pieces after half a year, do we need to provide them for free? So Betty, I can only tell you this. Based on ILO's indicators, RBA uniform is a working tool. Now, we must remember these workers wear the same uniform. See, 5 uniform, they work Monday to Friday. So there's 5 days, 1 day, 1 shirt, right? They are wearing this shirt here, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. And sometimes the shirt gets, wear and tear do happen, right? So what some companies do out there, they provide annual uniform. So some of the glove companies that I have worked with, that I know, they provide annual uniform, up to 6 uniform per year. So you may want to consider review your uniform policy. How frequently should you give? So if, from what you have mentioned, 5 uniform per year, 2 pairs of safety shoes. Maybe the 5 is not enough. That is why they keep asking you for additional uniform, right? If your work environment is, one of those that is noisy and dirty, and really it's very laborious. That means it's really hard work, physical work. The wear and tear to the uniform happens even faster. Yvonne asked this question. I have a question on the leaves and benefits section. Foreign workers need to complete their 2-year contract and go back for chutti or holidays, 2 to 3 months, sometimes known as a cooling period. Do they have annual leave such as 10 to 12 days per year that they're allowed to apply? How does this actually allow in our law? So Yvonne, that's a good question. It's an interesting question that you ask. Hardly I get this question, but anyway, since you asked, let me answer this. Now, we know that we only give minimum, right? Foreign workers, they get minimum 8 days. If a company give 12, 13 days, I think it's fantastic. But company only give 8 days. So first year 8 days, second year 8 days. Some company have a policy where if you don't use the annual leave in the first year, burns. Second year, you restart your engine again. You restart with 0. Now we know these foreign workers, they don't take leaves. You give me 8 days, where do I go? Every day I'm here in your company working, right? So you may want to review your annual leave practice. So for example, some of the companies I've worked with that I've consulted, they allow workers to accumulate their leave because they know, end of the day, workers, what normally they do, they don't go back every year, They go back every 3-4 years, right? When they go back, they want to go back for 3-4 months. Now, you see, when the worker's away from family for 2 years, just imagine you or even me or Betty, just imagine we are away from family for 2 years. We did not see them. We only can see them through WhatsApp, video call. 2 years we are away from our family. I'm sure if you have a chance to go back, you don't want to go back for 10 days. Come on, human being, right? So I would suggest one option that you could do is you could allow them to accumulate the leave. Every 3-4 years, accumulate, go back. So when they do that, they will have enough leaves. They don't take unpaid leave. Now, there are also companies that I've worked with that I know, every year, if the worker did not use the leave, they pay them back. They pay to them. So workers actually gains out of it. And when they go for leave, they take unpaid leave. So you might want to review your leave policy. Shui Yihua asked this. Malaysia is ILO member since 1957. So most companies should adopt minimum compliance and practices and procedure. Shui, is this now ILO has got many conventions, right? One of the conventions is forced labor. If the convention has been there since 1930, but we only rectified quite recently, right? So there are some conventions of ILO that Malaysia has not ratified. But of course, nothing stops the company from adopting the highest stringent standards. That is why many companies, I can give you some names, all the electronic companies, all the glove companies, Top Glove, Harta Lega, Supermax, some of the plantation companies, some of the EMS companies, many of them, they adopt these standards, even though Malaysia is not a comply with some of these conventions, right? So why? Because they have chosen to adopt the highest standards. So companies are free to do so. I wish, Shui, what you're saying, I understand where you're coming from. I agree with you. Malaysia should, companies in Malaysia should uplift their people practices. So you want to ask another question. I have a question about sick leave section. Foreign worker, sorry, this is the same. So must we follow 60 hours per week, including OT? So Zuraida, if you are going to adopt RBA, if your client wants you to go for RBA standards, it is 60 hours per week, including OT, RBA. But if you're not going for RBA, then of course you can follow the normal 48 hours plus the 104. But RBA standard clearly says it must be 60 hours per week, including overtime. Can we not approve if home leave for more than 3 months and only set 2 months? So Betty, it's again up to you, is it? Now, if you don't give, workers run away. Now, you must ask yourself, if the worker goes back every 2 years, maybe 2 months is enough. But some of your workers, they go back after 5 years, 4 years. I've seen cases 7 years. Now, if you go back home after 4 years, is 2 months enough? Right? I mean, let's face the fact, during our Chinese New Year, Hari Raya, Deepavali, even though we see our parents every now and then, etc., we take 2 weeks leave, right? Now, these workers have not seen their family for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. 2 months, I think, is a reasonable deal, right? We see our family every other day, every now and then. Christmas, we go back, etc. But Chinese New Year, we take 2 weeks. Deepavali, we take 2 weeks. Or Raya, we take 2 weeks, right? So, I think you get what I'm saying. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Are there any other questions? Any other questions? So any organizations here, if you are going to adopt RBA standards, it is not difficult per se, but a lot of homework needs to be done. A lot of basics, basic systematics and setup you need to do. Okay, Stephen Oy asked this question. Does forced labor prevention applies to domestic workers as well? Well, you see, I mean, our Malaysian law, Employment Act, also applies to domestic workers, except for some provisions. Now, ILO standards talks very much about how we treat workers. For example, the domestic worker who works for you, or if you engage domestic worker, you should have paid the fees, not them. So the agency fee of, I don't know what's the agency fees today. So let's say agency fees has got to be paid by you. You must treat them with dignity, making them work 14 hours a day. Is it fair? I know the law, work hours doesn't apply to foreign workers, our employment law. But is it fair to ask a domestic servant to work for 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day? I think this is very much, I will put ILO aside. I will take my hand, touch my heart, hold my prayer book, and I'll ask myself, you'll get your answers, right? So, well, I think passport, yes, employers will keep because workers are staying in the house. But there's also nothing wrong from asking the employer to give a locker and so on. So, so now ILO and RBA, I would say, they practice one standard for all. RBA doesn't affect, RBA standards is not for house, it's mainly for organizations, right? So let's put RBA aside. But when we look at ILO governs any migrant workers. So domestic servants are also migrant workers, right? So domestic servants usually need to work long hours, with or without force. How can we prevent them? Very simple. As a responsible employer, the call is on us. How do we want to treat these domestic workers? Why workers run away? Some of them run away, yes, personal issues. But are you sure some of them run away because of personal issues? No. Many of them also do run away because, they work for employers who are not reasonable, employers who don't give them proper food, employers who make them work long hours, employees who may cause physical harm to them. So they run away. Those who run away because of personal issues, I don't think we can do much. But those who run away because they are not treated well, right? They run. But I've seen also, I've seen real cases where the maid or this domestic worker works for the company for years and they're happy. Because why? The family treat them as one of their family members. The worker eats in the same table at the same time with the family, right? So to me, how to prevent workers from running away, not just domestic workers, also your migrant workers, your foreign workers in your factory, in your company. How to prevent them from running away? Treat them with care, with respect, with dignity. They will not run. Simple as that, right? Okay, so Betty asked this, but if no setup limit, if they go back 3 to 5 months, this may affect productivity. Well, I think, Betty, you got to balance between business needs and human needs, right? If you do not want them to go long, then why not you set up a policy? Tell them every 3 years, you please go back and come back. Every 3 years, go back. Let me tell you this, there are also companies that helps to pay for their flight ticket. The company says, go back 3 years, I pay for it. Sometimes the flight ticket is not expensive. There is one company that pays full. There's another company, I know they pay half. They say, go back, go meet the family, come back, we pay half your ticket. Workers are happy. So, right. So, because I know most employees will pray that workers do not go back. So to me, I think we got to balance between running a business and moral consciousness. Okay. Yeah. So any other questions that you all may have? I'll be, we still have a bit of time. So if you want to set up your foreign workers management policy, grievance management policy, forced labor policy, prevention of forced labor policy, whistleblowing policy, if you have not done so, please go to our forum page. The link is on the screen. Download this. You can get these copies. Use the search button and download the templates. Okay. So, is there any other questions? So, for those companies who are embarking on RBA audit or even any audit, doesn't matter, there is an effective, smarter way to prepare your company towards compliance, how to make things easy, lean, and fast, how to avoid Jom Hebo, Pesta Jom Hebo, every now and then, every now and then, every now and then, before an audit. It's very tiring. It's very frustrating, right? There is a way out, but you need to really think hard. So those of you who want to learn how to do this, do join our workshop, and you'll get all these ideas. Okay, so I think there's no other questions from anyone. Let me see if there's any other question. Okay, yeah, there's one or two. Okay, let me answer this. In terms of recruitment fees, to ensure no workers paid for the service, how many times do we need the cost verification? Now, let me tell you, Aline, cost verification did not work in many cases, right? You ask the worker did not pay. Now, let me give you a very rare, very weird example, but it happens. The worker in Nepal, the father told him, son, please go, family is struggling, go to Malaysia. This guy told me that he can get a job for you, you please go. The father paid some money to the agent, but did not tell the son, right? So when you ask the worker, did you pay? I never pay. Arrive in Malaysia, did you pay? I never pay. After 6 months, did you pay? I never pay. Now, then one day, because the son sent back money, the father accumulated money, paid them off. Then one day the father said, son, you know what? Actually, I paid 5,000 for you to go to Malaysia, but I didn't want to burden you, so I did not tell you. But I paid, and now I've paid back the agent. So what happens is, at that time, or maybe around that period, you do another survey. You ask the worker, hey, did you pay money? The worker say, yeah, we paid 5,000. So sometimes workers are not aware the brother or the father have paid on behalf of them. Sometimes they don't tell because the agent in the home country may, I'm not saying did, but may have threatened them. You don't tell you paid me this money. And these are all real cases, right? So I can tell you, the survey that you do may not work, right? The survey that you do may not work. So that is why one way to manage this is by adopting ethical recruitment framework, where you take control of the whole process. When you take control, you see lesser issues. But when you take a hands-free approach and ask your agents to do it, you see all these issues. So doing a survey doesn't bring you much benefit because the workers may not tell you the truth. They are being threatened. They do not know what. You see, when the workers arrive in Malaysia, just imagine, they do not know the culture, they don't know the language. For the first time in a foreign country, everything is like, alien to them. These guys are coming from really third world countries, Malaysia, I don't consider Malaysia a third world country, even though we are labeled as third world country. Now, some of them come to Malaysia, they look at airport, wow, my God, the airport is fantastic, man. Nepal airport may not be like this. They see, wow, look at the highway, look at the buildings, look at the company, so high-tech. Now, sometimes they are timid. They are shocked. When you ask them, everything, yes, sir, 3 bag full, yes, sir, 3 bag full. But sometimes they may not be aware. After some time, then they become more mature. After some time, they start knowing their rights. Then they said, yeah, I think I should tell them I paid money. There could also be workers who take advantage. We do not know. So to prevent all of this, you as an employer, under the ethical recruitment framework, you have to take control of the process, not allowing your agent to do it for you. So we want it easy, suffer later. You want to have an easy time later, you suffer early. That means you do it early, do it at the beginning, you take control, do the hard work, you enjoy your time later. So bersusah-susah dahulu, bersenang-senang kemudian. Okay, let me see what else. Okay, Betty got a lot of questions. Betty need to have coffee with me. If we plan to do canteen, can we do share with workers per month 260, company bear 100? Now any deduction, Betty, just to answer your question straightforward, any deduction that you have, you must get Labour Department's approval. Simple as that. So if you make any deduction, even though workers agree, you must get Labour Department. So if Labour approves it, you're lucky. But the question is, why do you want to get into the business of co-sharing canteen food and all that? You pay the workers as per the law, treat them with care, they buy their own food. Easy for you. Why do you want to create extra work for yourself? Okay, yep. Let me see if I missed any questions. So Roxana asked this question. Some companies uses ways to cheat workers on payroll with complicated calculation and formula. Agreed. So Roxana, I think it's a very valid point you've raised. That is why RBA, ILO requires company to make it very clear to workers how their salary is paid, how the formula is paid. they must understand how, what are they paid for? How are they paid? So that when RBA auditors or ILO, when ILO audit takes place, the auditors would interview the workers privately without you being there. How do you do this? Do you know this? When the workers say, I do not know, that's it, you have a finding. And to resolve one finding, trust me, you'll go around the world in 80 days. A lot of hard work. So do it right. So Kala Raman asked this question, what about notice period resignation? According to EA, notice period, 3 categories. How can EA, now you see, EA, even though they've mentioned, was it 4, 6, sorry, 8, 12 and 16. Now, if your contract stipulates a particular notice period, you follow your contract. You don't need to follow EA. EA says that in the absence, in the contract, if your contract is absent, silent, don't talk about notice period, then you got to follow what EA says. I mean, they said it cannot be less than what EA says, right? That is what EA says, 6, 8, and 12. Now remember. Now, if your contract says 1 week, is 1 week. If your contract says 1 month, 1 month. Now, RBA standard says that workers who fail to provide notice period, the maximum penalty, or shall I say the maximum amount they're going to pay you is 60% of their 1 month salary. So to me, for foreign workers, why do you need a long notice period? I would say a reasonable notice period is 1 month. Okay, so yep, I think I have done all the questions. So I think, yep, so it's 4:05. So I think I'll stop here for now. We'll share these slides. Please make the best use of the slides. It's quite informative. There are a couple of links. Do click the link. There are a couple of documents I've shared. The compilation by ILO and MEF is a good document where it gives you all the guidance, the do's and don'ts, what you got to do. I would really urge you to download the document, study it. There are a couple of documents produced by Impact, wonderful documents. Please study, please download it. ILO indicators, please download it. And all this will be useful when you want to formulate your policies, your processes, when you want to prepare for any future audits and so on, right? And those of you who are going through RBA audit, I would also urge you to go through a formal RBA training, because they covers many more things, especially if you're going for it. But if you want to understand what are those 5 elements, how to prepare for it, that's quite easy, quite straightforward. Okay, so those of you who are interested, do join our workshop, which is on early December, right? Okay, so any other questions that you all may want to ask? One last question, if any. Any last question? So if no, then I would like to thank you for joining in today's Friday. Have a great weekend ahead. And for those colleagues here who are celebrating Deepavali, happy Deepavali to you and family. And please do join the forum. Plenty of discussions and materials that you could make the best use of. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today, and happy Deepavali.